Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an inflammatory Charles Coulombe.
Inflammatory? Inflammatory?
Yes.
You mean burning like Mission San Gabriel?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that just happened in real time, ladies and gentlemen. We just got the news. And I got to tell you something. Vincenzo here and I were burning mad. But you know, there are other possibilities other than arson. It could have been an electrical problem. The roof, of course, is 200 years old, no sprinklers. Or there's another theory.
Okay.
The other theory is that Bishop Barron was preaching. Well, you know, he's got the Word on Fire ministry.
Word on Fire, yeah. Got it.
It could be he was really getting into it and the roof took, you know. The roof just... But seriously, folks, I sincerely hope that it wasn't arson. Because if it was, ladies and gentlemen, this takes the game to a whole new place. You know, Mission San Gabriel, most of you probably aren't familiar with it. I am. Vinny is. We've both been going there for many, many years.
It's the mission for me.
The mission.
You know?
The mother church of all of the Los Angeles diocese.
And it's right next door, you know, to us.
Yeah.
So.
And it's very close to the Tumblr House towers. They could see the flames from the penthouse. And I am sorry to say that for us, it's rather like Notre Dame burning, except, of course, that Notre Dame was less damaged.
For me, this is more personal.
Well, yeah, it's right there. And fortunately, by the way, the flames they got up to the altar, but no further, which I'm very happy to hear. I mean, the artwork that was lost, I'm sure, is irreplaceable. It just, again, if this was arson, may the scum who did it have a taste of their own. If it wasn't, then we can take it as God's judgment on his feckless people. Speaking of which, though, but also having to do with flame and fire, I want to thank everyone in the city of Los Angeles for the wonderful 4th of July fireworks demonstration.
You weren't here. Did you hear reports? Did I tell you how it was?
Oh gosh, yes. I was watching from the drones, you know, they had on the television. And the funny thing was, because, you know, I could get live LA TV if I'm really desperate on my computer. And they had drones going over the city and seeing the incredible fire. It was like Somar is every 4th of July, only it was all of LA.
Yeah, the fireworks are illegal in Arcadia, and 4th of July there's normally no fireworks near my house, but it was next door. It was all over the place in Arcadia, and not just normal fireworks, illegal fireworks shooting up into the air. I'd never seen so many fireworks in my life. I mean, it was crazy. It was all that Garcetti tweet where it's like, oh, we're going to have to celebrate 4th of July a little differently. Everybody stay safe.
So they did.
Yeah, we did.
They celebrated a little differently.
That's what that was.
What did he say? He said, stay home and celebrate at home. And that's what people did. I have to say, you see, in Somar, where my brother has a house, it's like that every 4th of July. And I would just sit there in the backyard, and all the stuff be going up. Of course, every now and then you've got bits of rubble falling down on your face, but it's great stuff. But to see the whole basin erupt like that, and also Anaheim, I have a theory about why Anaheim did it. There was no Disney fireworks this year.
Ooh.
See.
Okay.
So I suspect that the local Anaheimers made up for it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, yeah, there were a lot of, I guess all the shows were canceled probably. I know there's a big show on the beach. They closed down the beach for the 4th of July?
Yeah.
Now that in and of itself, I have a personal saying in terms of advice for California beaches and when to go. I said there are 4 days in which you have to avoid the beach in California, and they all happen on the same weekend. They really do. It's really, because I've done this, and it's like, and I've said I'm never doing this again because the beach is absolutely mobbed in an unreal way. That entire weekend.
4th of July weekend is for beachgoers the way New Year's Eve and St. Patrick's Day are for booze hounds. You don't want to be out with all the once-a-year amateurs.
Yeah.
You just...
And so now so it makes sense that since that sort of outlet was deprived, that we just took matters into our own hands.
I think it was interesting. It was wonderful. I saw the occasional palm tree go up in flames.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, see, when the flames hit, they don't care where they hit, and palm trees are very flammable.
Wow.
So I saw several of them going up in flames, and it was all this. Oh well. But I was very proud of the city of Los Angeles and its denizens. And everyone was maintaining social distancing from their fireworks. They didn't hold on to them; they shot them up in the air. And I thought, frankly, as far as the coronavirus went, this was a much safer thing than the demonstrations were.
That's true.
And I think that Garcetti and the rest of that gang, Newsom and all the rest of the morons that run the state and the city, I'm glad they got to experience this. And I suspect that the fireworks crossed party lines.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it was a unifying factor in our fair city. And who knows, maybe this 4th of July will go down in history as the beginning of the return of sanity to the City of Angels. I wouldn't bet the farm on it, but you never know.
Yeah, so I apologize if this episode, Charles and I are a little fired up. A little
so
fiery.
To speak.
Yeah, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I feel such a blaze of inspiration. It's a regular bonfire of the vanities,
Oh, gosh.
What?
All right.
Snap, crackle, pop.
All right. So, is there anything else before we get to the memes of production?
Blah. Yes, I think there is.
Okay.
I'm tucked away here in Europe, far from the scene of what's going on, an exile from my native land.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking that should be good for some kind of sympathy.
No. You have abandoned us.
And I was exiled.
You're happy that you're over there. You're like, oh, United Snakes. I don't want to be the United Snakes. Just let it burn to the ground.
I was expelled.
That's not...
I was exiled.
You're off to greener pastures.
Well, there's that, but I was still exiled and expelled and stuff. And that's not all. Before I forget, I did want to congratulate you. You did the 4th of July was not just about the fireworks display. I want you to know that all of your employees are very happy with the weenie roast you put on for them on the 4th of July weekend.
You're welcome.
I got great reports. The mobs were busy. Well, there were no mobs this week. They're just busy setting off fireworks. So no, apparently everything was going very well in the tower right now. Even from the 13th floor, there was a. I'm sorry, what was I talking about? I remember. Even from the 13th floor, there was a. I'm sorry, what was I talking about?
Well, we were moving on, Charles. That's what we were doing.
Oh, all right. Are you sure, though? Wasn't I talking about
No.
the 13th floor? That's it. This is very difficult.
Yeah, it is very difficult. I agree. Let's see if we can move forward with this episode, shall we?
All right.
All right.
Sure.
All right. Memes of production. Bring down the icon.
I say nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. We can't trust anyone else with the memes. We need to protect them deep in the Tumblr House vaults.
That's right.
All right.
They are integral to this country's welfare.
Some integralist humor there. All right. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So the first one, I guess, is what you asked me to put up. So this is a map of the United States. The electoral map.
The precincts.
The precincts.
This is the 2016 election that brought in the Trumpster and defeated Harpy Marx. That's not nice. What's her name? I went. Oh, Hillary Clinton. That was a real lapse. I couldn't think of her name.
Wow.
But it wasn't Harpy Marx, though. It was Hillary Clinton. Anyway, the point is that the red, of course, are the precincts that went for the Trumpster. The blue are the ones that went for Mrs. Clinton. Now, in what appears to be a slowly gathering steam civil war, these are the two sides. Now, bear in mind that these are not rigid. In civil conflict, nothing ever is. I'm sure there are many people who voted for Mrs. Clinton 4 years ago who probably didn't appreciate having their stores burned down, and who therefore might be of a very different mind today. I can't imagine there are too many Trump voters 4 years ago who joined Antifa or that kind of thing. Nevertheless, more or less, those are the boundaries of the two nations within our country.
I'm pro-union in this conflict.
whatever that means.
That's carrying on your nonsense from what is it, Chaz?
Oh yes.
The Confederacy rising up.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was horrified to see that the mayoress of Seattle turned Karen.
What did she do?
She suppressed it.
What they brought the SWAT team in, or how do you suppress it?
Yeah. Well, I don't recall, but they CHOP is no more. CHOP or Chaz or Chump, whatever it was called most recently. She destroyed it. She ordered it shut down and ended. So the new nation of Borning died in its cradle, strangled by this Karen of a mayoress in Seattle.
Darn, I wish I would have liked to have seen that on television, but I've been staying away from the news so much that I missed it. Darn.
I feel bad.
So they basically arrested everybody.
We don't call it that anymore. They were assisted for their own good into more permanent living spaces.
They didn't arrest people for treason?
No, there's no such thing as treason in today's world. They arrested them for being bad. They canceled them.
They canceled them? What is that? Some sort of euphemism for killing?
No! You haven't been paying attention, have you? No, canceling is when you get an online lynch mob to go after somebody and get them fired and get Facebook and Twitter and all them guys to dump them. That's called canceling someone. And was it you last week? The new thing on Twitter, whatever it is, where you you click something on somebody's deal, and everybody goes after them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's canceling someone.
Oh, you're talking about the meme, the send the mob.
Send the mob.
Yeah.
When you send the mob, when you send the mob, the person's being canceled.
Got it.
And you know what a Karen is?
It's like a loud female.
A loud white female who's using her privilege to dominate and destroy.
Why is it white?
It's always whites. Whites are evil.
Okay.
Didn't you know that? If we've learned nothing out of all of this, isn't it the fact that even a really woke person like the mayoress of Seattle, at the end of the day, is just another Karen, using her privilege to destroy the rightful aspirations of the downtrodden? I am about the only person to the right of Attila the Hun you're going to hear stand up for the rights of Chaz against that Karen in the mayor's office in Seattle.
We need to get her out of office.
Oh, so she can destroy some other poor Chaz. Yeah, I see. Fine. What, you want to make her a Secretary of Defense next?
I wouldn't go that far.
But what office did you want to get her into? If you get her out of that office, she's got to go into another one, obviously. So which one?
I think that's a logical fallacy that you're abiding by.
Well, wait, now stop. Obviously, she's in office now, so she's wonderful. We can't afford to have her talent lost to the nation. So if you say we've got to get her out of office, that's fine. It means we've got to get her into a bigger one. Maybe Congress. Maybe governess of Washington State. Secretary General of the UN.
Sure. What do they do anyway?
UN High Commissioner for Refugees.
Perfect. Perfect.
She could run UNICEF. Become the trick-or-treat mistress general.
Trick-or-treat. Wow. Okay.
Well, no, I think that's something she could run. The trick-or-treat for UNICEF program.
Yes.
You are so incredulous. You know what your problem is? It's a lack of trust in our betters.
I
can
so.
tell.
I guess so, Charles.
I can tell. You don't trust these people.
I don't.
See? What kind of an example are you giving tomorrow's children?
All right, Charles, moving on.
Okay. Presumably they're not born yet, so I suppose it doesn't really matter what you do.
All right. We have a
second meme.
We have more memes. Let's see. So Patty, one of our patrons, sent in a poem of sorts. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it as I bring up the pictures of it.
Don't be a meme.
I don't know what that means.
It's like a meanie, only mispronounced.
All right, he says, all is quiet on the Catholic internet. Quiet as an army in battle array set. Father James Martin is bashing the trads. The TFP is protesting him over 2 dads. Dr. Taylor Marshall is selling his book. And Damian Thompson's calling Pope Francis a crook. And don't get me started on gay gingerbread, lest old Father Martin might well turn red. The Sedevacantists are amusing as ever. Bergoglio as Pope? Nope. No, never. Church militant into the society will fight, but all hail His Majesty, Trad Cat Knight. And if life sight is the news one peruses, defending the Pope will earn you some bruises. Susan is tweeting about our worship spaces. whilst the Institute is buying more laces. Commonweal has long been unholy. Let's hit Trent, another piece by Fagioli. Father Rosica is failing in math. And dear Pachamama, well, she gets a bath. Charles Coulombe, as usually monarchical. Society, like the church, ought to be hierarchical. In America, there's an ecumenism of hate. At least 'tis so when the Pope's friends pontificate. I hope you've enjoyed the tour we've been on. A little trip through the sheep's fold lawn. Although we really have not gone far, it makes me cry out, Maranatha. All right. So.
Wow. Well, that is creative.
That is creative.
The rhyme's a little ragged, but it works.
What's the gay gingerbread?
I don't know.
Must be a meme or something. You young people nowadays with your memes and your music television. I don't understand it anymore. All right.
Yeah, me neither. I don't know. I was banned. I got banned from one element of social media.
What?
TikTok.
You got banned from TikTok? No, you didn't.
Apparently, my dad's was too bizarre.
That's fake news. Fake news.
What? What? What do you mean it's fake news? I was called the Mark Anastasio of the over 60 set.
I don't even know what that means.
It's all right. Apparently, it's big on TikTok. I don't really know either.
All right, one more meme for today from Thomas. Libertarians say that the free market will regulate itself. Corporations, well, you've got a picture of I guess this is a corporation with a science project saying, how much sawdust can you put in a Rice Krispie treat before people notice?
The answer is probably never. I mean, probably you just keep on putting it in. They won't catch on. Oh, gosh.
That's a little bit. That's kind of thought-provoking, to be honest.
It is.
That to what extent would a libertarian society become sort of the victim of tyranny?
Well, look, you've heard of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why they came to be, they were invented because of what was called the Pure Food and Drug Act. Because in the late 19th century, there was no real regulation in terms of canning and production of beef and so on.
Yeah.
And then I think in the late 1890s, early 1900s, I forget, a gentleman named Sinclair Lewis, I think. I always confuse Upton Sinclair and Sinclair Lewis, but I think it was Sinclair Lewis, wrote a book called The Jungle, which was about the production of beef in the stockyards. Garbage that went into canned foods. And when I say garbage,
yeah,
rat droppings and all kinds of good stuff. So the result of that book and various other similar things was the Pure Food and Drug Act. And along about the same time, we had all sorts of other regulations come out. And mind you, Teddy Roosevelt was the president at the time. And he stood for what were called in those days reforms.
Yeah.
So, would we really want to repeal the Pure Food and Drug Act?
No.
I wouldn't think so. Do we really want to get rid of the Board of Health?
No.
You know why we have boards of health? I mean, there was a time when restaurants and taverns, if they were clean, they were clean. If they were filthy, they were filthy.
Yeah, no, being working for marketing agency, marketers will go hog wild without the FDA. you've got this new fad going on, CBD, right? I don't know if you've heard of this, because
No.
since you're in Austria, CBD, people probably hear it on. I've heard commercials on the radio and all this and that. It's cannabidiol oil, and that is basically, I think, a supply-driven industry, because pot is legal. They extract, I think, the narcotic element from pot, but you have a lot of non-narcotic elements of hemp that I guess produce relaxation or relief.
Bit like pipe tobacco.
But the companies, the marketing went wild for a while, because they're saying, it provides all these medical benefits. And the FDA cracked down and said, you can't do that. You just can't. There's no studies. There's no studies done, so you can't be marketing this snake oil like a cure-all.
No, see, that's another thing we lost with the Pure Food and Drug Act, with snake oil sales.
I know, but it's coming back with CBD.
Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Silver's Golden Elixir, good for what ails you. 85% alcohol. Whatever you got, Dr. Silver's Golden Elixir will be sure to cure you.
Yeah, and so, yeah, they do a lot of really good things in terms of labeling and what you can call food. Like if something... yeah, like with water, I remember, because I was in the water industry, and there are regulations now in terms of what you can call spring water. Like everybody was saying this, even though it's, you get water from different sources. You have to be specific. So FDA, great job on a lot of things.
So you're saying my hose is not a spring?
No. Your hose is definitely not a spring. If you put that hose in and use it for bottled water to sell, you cannot call that spring water. No.
But it comes out of the ground.
Not a spring, not a natural spring source.
Well, but I've seen natural springs that have spigots.
You're being
and
difficult,
my hose
Charles.
has a spigot.
You're being difficult. All right.
No, I'm just asking.
No. It needs to come from a natural groundwater source. And while your pipes are in the ground...
Yes. This is what I'm saying. You prove my point. So my hose...
They do not originate from groundwater.
I can't see that. For as far as I know, they do. I don't know.
I know, but life... There's more to life than what you simply see, Charles.
For all I know, it's coming from an artesian well. Pure artesian spring water coming right up.
You are a true modern man. If I can't see it, well then it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Or it is whatever I want it to be.
Well, yeah, because it's easier to sell what I'm selling as artesian spring water than to say it's from my garden hose. Have you ever seen a bottle of anything labeled garden hose water?
That would be something.
See? I didn't think so. People don't sell garden hose water. They do sell artesian spring water.
I like this.
See? It all makes sense if you twist your head the right way.
All right, on to the questions.
Oh, boy.
We have a very timely question from Andrew, who says... Given the recent desecration of their sacred images, I was wondering if Charles could elucidate on the figures of Saint Junipero Serra and King Saint Louis IX. Why is the current conglomeration of cretins, mutants, and various other tribes of scumbags singling these two saints out in particular? Can Charles please take some time to talk about both saints, and what about their lives Catholics should be emulating and defending?
Well, of course, the cretins, mutants, and scumbags you will always have with you. But they're certainly on the prowl today. And given that they just burned down one of Father Serra's missions, if in fact it was they, and it wasn't either some sort of accident or the word on fire exploding, always a possibility.
The word on fire exploding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, you've heard Bishop Barron preach. When he gets really, into it, really enthused, I can see that happening. Just sheer
Okay, yeah. Absolutely.
enthusiasm.
Yes.
The word on fire.
Okay.
All right, it could be. I'm just saying.
Could
Anyway, the thing is that both of them were. St. Louis, I think, is being attacked just because he's there.
Yeah.
I'm sure these morons don't know the first thing about him. Of course, they don't know the first thing about Father Serra either. But they've had years of idiots in universities and scumbags in government attacking Father Serra as an oppressor of the Indians. Whereas the whole St. Louis thing just popped up out of nowhere.
No, you know what? I think they're 100% right. I think that there wasn't a single Spanish who lived who wasn't who didn't brutalize the Indians. And so I think it should become a talking point that the Spanish people in general, their descendants, I think we need to seriously consider reparations. Yeah. Yeah, no, they're right. I agree. I agree.
If you have a drop of Spanish blood, you're an oppressor.
Yeah.
And you need to pay up.
Yep. These people are right. These liberals are right. Yeah.
Yep. So all of you Spanish surname chicks who were exulting over the burning of the mission, pull out your purses, ladies.
Yeah.
Time to pay up.
Yep.
I'll collect, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and I'll take your credit card.
Sorry, no
Just
CODs.
Sure yeah, no CODs. Void were prohibited by sanity. No, I tell you, though, there's nothing worse than hearing these stupid slags go on about it. Anyway, moving along, to answer your question, both of them were, in a sense, fighters for the faith, crusaders and missionaries, both at the same time. Father Serra, both were Franciscan, which is why San Luis Rey was named after St. Louis the King. He was a Franciscan Third Order man, St. Louis the Ninth was. You got to understand that the crusading impulse and the missionary impulse are very tightly connected.
Yeah.
And never do you see that so well as with these two characters. St. Junipero Serra was a disciple of Saint
Blessed Raymond Lully.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. I had a lapse there, a senior moment, which I can assure you I'll be getting more and more of as the older I get. At any rate, Blessed Raymond Lully, of course, was all about missionary work. He started out originating his own philosophy, which really centered on the need for the church to evangelize and encompass the whole of mankind. Pursuing this philosophy pulled him out of the university and put him into the mission field, trying to convert the Muslims in North Africa, who killed him. Father Serra, St. Junipero, was a professor of Lully's philosophy at the University of Palma de Mallorca, and the same thing happened. The force of that philosophy drove him out of the lecture hall and into the missions. Before he died, Blessed Raymond Lully, who incidentally also wrote a book on chivalry.
I read that book, actually.
Yeah.
He,
this is why I'm saying chivalry and evangelization were intimately connected, and you see that with St. Francis as well.
Yeah.
Just so I'll mention that. Blessed Raymond Lully wrote a novel called Blanquerna, in which he outlined a scheme for universal evangelization and the creation of villages, which correspond very closely to what Father Serra did with the missions in Mexico and California. When Father Serra left Mallorca and he came to Mexico, one of the first things they did was send him out to the Sierra Gorda, which is a mountain range near Mexico City. And there he established 5 or 6 missions. And then when Carlos III expelled the Jesuits from Mexico and Baja California needed their missions restaffed, the Franciscans accepted the job, and they sent Father Serra there. First thing he did was found another mission, San Francisco de Velicata. But then the next year, the order came, well, you've got to settle Alta California. You've got to start founding missions up there. And he said, well, look, I can't do both. So the Dominicans replaced the Franciscans in Baja, and the Franciscans devoted their attention to Alta California. He always said, always go forward, never look back. And he was just an amazing man. I've read his letters. Truly filled with faith. He loved the Indians. He protected them from the depredations of the Spanish soldiery, which makes the current charges so stupid. You know, the hallmark of today's idiocy is that it's not just wrong, it's so wrong. You know, it is the difference between saying that, oh, I don't know. It's the difference between saying that George Washington wasn't the nicest man who ever lived and saying George Washington actively collaborated with the British to suppress the revolution. Well, actually, that never happened. That's not only not true, it's the opposite of what the story was. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, yeah.
There are gradations here. There's like simple error, and then there's being just so wrong that in a sane society, if you weren't beaten to a pulp and left for dead, you would be laughed off stage. But you know, we're in a position now where people who are that stupid have the whip arm,
or evil,
both on the street, or well, you can be both. It doesn't have to be either or. You can be stupid and evil.
See, because I think we're talking about the difference between negligence and just outright malice, outright fabrication.
Well, and there is willful stupidity for malicious reasons.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, these people, it's not just that they don't know the truth. They wouldn't be interested in it. I mean, if you could 100% convince them that they're wrong, they would prefer to be wrong than right.
Yeah, again, like the devils.
Ultimately, yeah. Well, the difference, of course, is that they can convert, the devils can't. But obviously, the longer you hold an error of any kind, the more you get invested in it. The more your sense of selfhood is tied up with holding that error. And the time comes when, for you to say I was wrong, just becomes too great an act of humility.
I think of that whenever I see these old, crusty Catholic politicians who are 2 feet from the grave, but still, I don't know, they don't seem to be scared of Judgment Day.
Well, no, and often it's because they've had 2 generations of priests and bishops telling them they were right. I mean, think of Cardinal Mahoney and Congressman Roybal. You know?
I don't know who that is.
Well, Congressman Roybal was a congressman from L.A. In fact, he was present at my investiture into the Boy Scouts in 1971, just so you'll know, when I was a young boy. But Roybal was the first Mexican-American in Congress. And then when the Democrats went pro-abortion, he was all for it. He piled up a really big pro-abort record. Well, this is a funny story in a sick way. So he and Mahoney were very, very close, of course. But then a funny thing happened. Back in '86, I think, Manning was still alive, and Mahoney was still just the Archbishop. He wasn't a cardinal yet, because Manning was alive and could vote. But it was obvious that he was going to be unable to vote soon. So Mahoney makes the statement that no Catholic can vote for a pro-abortion candidate. Now, there was no election in sight. The only thing in sight was that Manning was no longer going to be able to vote in the election, in the conclave. So he says this, he duly gets his red hat, but the state Knights of Columbus, mistakenly taking his grace, as he was, at his word, moved to finally expel Roybal from the order because of his pro-abort voting record. Mahoney intervened personally to keep him in. So, the fun part, though, is that whatever else you say about Roybal, he did have his limits. So they named the federal building downtown after him. But they put this weird sculpture of a sort of infant female figure in a fountain with her genitalia displayed. It is the most horrific looking thing. And Roybal was absolutely outraged that they should have that in a complex that bore his name. He said, and I quote, "It's going to attract pedophiles from all over." So he demanded that they take the stuff out, but in the end they wouldn't. And so he went to his grave very, very bitter that this hideous sculpture was there at the place that to this day bears his name.
Oh.
Yeah, I felt bad too.
So sad.
Very sad.
All right, let's get back on track. What about King Louis IX?
Well, King Louis is a horse of a different color. Oh, and let me just say, last thing about Sarah. Attacking the statues of St. Junipero for quote-unquote exploitation and colonization and blah, blah, blah. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Firstly, as far as colonization goes, listen carefully, my little ones. Everybody who is listening to me is a beneficiary of European colonization. This is true if you are black or white or brown or yellow or pistachio or hydrogen sulfide. You are a beneficiary of colonialism. I want to say that again. You are a beneficiary of colonialism. Everything that's of value to you in your little life comes to you because of colonialism. If you don't like it, unless you want to be a filthy scumbag hypocrite, and we know we're all incapable of that because we're wonderful, you've got to stop speaking colonial languages. No English, no Spanish, no French. You've got to find some indigenous tongue. Until then, just shut up until you find an indigenous tongue you can learn. Secondly, you must stop wearing European clothing. You mustn't use European technology. So I'm afraid you've got to throw away your little phone, got to throw away your little computer. Yes, little one. You've got to stop living in a European-style house. You need to go build a teepee or a wigwam or something to live in, or a wickiup. And you've got to stop eating European food. That's right, my little vegan. You've got to go out and hunt and gather. Or, depending on where you're living, maybe just sit in the mud and eat widgety grubs. That's all you can get your little hands on. Oh, and by the way, no more Western medicine for you, my little darling. No. If you get ill, go to a shaman and, smoke some tobacco or something. Have a poultice put on you from lizard blood. And above all, do not say or do anything in modern society. Go off into the woods. There's no place for you in this innately unjust and evil structure, which, by the way, created you. The problem, of course, is that even being a Marxist or an indigenist or whatever drivel you've got, all those things come from Western philosophies brought by the colonialists. The truth is, you can only really free yourself of colonialism if you scoop out whatever gray matter is in that little skull of yours. And then you'll be free. But as long as you've got a Western-formed brain, you're a beneficiary of injustice. I don't know what you're going to do with yourself. Me, I embrace it. I am proud to say that I descend from both the colonizers and the colonized. I am gleeful that I believe the faith that was brought to my ancestors by outsiders. I am gleeful in being able to get along in a couple of European languages. I am happy to use the technology that has come my way. I love Western food ways. I love Western medicine. And I gladly use the technology that has been bestowed upon me. Those are your choices, wing-wings. Anyway, St. Louis was a crusader, a knight, an amazing man, one of the best of kings. He was first cousin, incidentally, to Saint Ferdinand III, who is of Spain, Castile, who's an important figure because he gave his name to the San Fernando Valley. Mission San Fernando, which is probably next on the morons list, was named after him. Why they're going after him, I can't tell you. He fought the Muslims to the degree that they respected him. And they only respected strong warriors. That's another thing. I love these little creatures who are supposed to be pacifists, and who a few months ago had to go to safe spaces in colleges if they heard anything that was upsetting. They needed gatekeepers and all that kind of stuff. And now they're out committing acts of violence and pulling down statues. Anyway, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It's difficult for me to keep on track right now. But St. Louis fought the last two crusades, the first of which brought him to the Holy Land. He reorganized the then somewhat chaotic administration in Jerusalem, and not Jerusalem, but the coastal plain. The last crusade he died on. He ended up in Tunisia, died of a disease. He was absolutely beloved by the French, and to this day, one of the most popular names for French churches is Saint Louis, Roi de France. And that's true not just in France, but in Quebec, in the French West Indies, in Senegal, Madagascar, French India. Wherever the French have gone, there's always at least one church named St. Louis. And, of course, his was such a popular name, he was the 9th. But there were 19 Louis in all. So 10 more kings of France took his name after.
Not bad.
Not bad at all.
Okay. Whew. Okay. Almost 50 minutes deep into the episode, and we finished the first question.
Well, people have been complaining that we've been skimping, so
yeah,
looks like they're going to get their money's worth tonight.
All right. Next question is from a new top floor executive, Claudia.
Oh, Claudia.
Ooh, see, Tumblr House embraces diversity. See?
Indeed. And I understand there's a new place at the table in the executive dining room just for her.
That's right. For those lobster lunches.
Oh.
And she says, it's great to finally join this community. I was wondering if Charles has heard of the Legend of El Cantuna. When visiting family in Quito, I heard the legend that it was constructed by the devil, supposedly. Could there be any truth to this? And are there similar stories from other parts of the world?
Oh, yeah. Lots.
So what's El Cantuna?
Well, El Cantuna, basically, it's not what but who. He was an architect who was asked to build the major part, the central part of the cathedral in Quito. And there was no way he could do it at the time given. So he made a deal with the devil that the devil would do it, and in return, of course, he would get his soul. Well, the devil went to work, but El Cantuna was thinking, I don't know if this is a good idea, actually, the whole selling one's soul thing. So he surreptitiously took a brick out of the thing, pulled it out. And then daybreak came, the devil laughed and said, well, it's finished. Time for you to come away with me now. But El Cantuna said, I don't think so. Look, there's a stone missing. You didn't finish it by daybreak. I'm in the clear. So the devil was very annoyed at being outsmarted and vanished. But he wasn't happy. And there are lots and lots of stories of this sort all over Europe about various buildings, churches and other buildings that supposedly the devil played a hand in building and then was either outsmarted or not in terms of payment. At the cathedral at Aachen, for instance, the story goes that for the work he did on the cathedral, it was agreed the devil would get the first being to set foot inside the heart of the first being, to set foot inside the cathedral once it was finished. So they grabbed a wolf from the adjoining forest and threw him in. And the devil very annoyedly took the wolf's heart, but he wasn't happy. If you go to the cathedral today, there's a bronze statue of a wolf with an empty heart, an empty chest cavity.
Who are these people that they're hiring to build cathedrals who are so easily doing deals with the devil?
I don't know. I mean, it's almost as though they were elected officials in a state house or a city hall in America today.
Okay, never mind.
What? You asked a question. I gave an answer.
Oh,
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I don't judge.
In El Cantuna, is there like a piece of the cathedral missing? Like it's like, oh, here's the missing piece.
Well, it took a brick out.
I know, but is there a single spot? It's like, oh, this is the spot.
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised because that's usually like another thing will be that the devil was cheated and he got annoyed, so he threw a rock or something, and that's the explanation for why there's a big rock near a given church or something. It's one of the rocks that the devil dropped when he realized he'd been cheated. There are lots of these sorts of stories. As to whether or not they were true, I can only say I wasn't there.
What a cop-out.
That is a cop-out.
Come on.
You will never hear me contradict a legend, even if it seems a bit weird to me, simply because, as the infamous Father Feeney used to say, let me see you start a legend.
Why not? What?
It's not that easy. You know all the legends about elephants hiding in trees?
I mean, the 13th floor is a legend.
No, it's not a legend. I mean, I myself went and I saw... I'm sorry, what were we talking about? Oh, the 13th floor, I remember. So the elevator door opened and... What were we talking about?
Legends.
I remember, the 13th floor. So I took the elevator up and what? Are you okay?
I'm okay. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was about to tell you how I took the elevator up one day and stopped at the 13th floor. The door opened.
All right. We got it, Charles. We got it.
Got what?
A glass of water. We're set now. All right.
Okay.
Are
you sure we're talking about something else?
I'm 100% sure.
Okay.
That we're moving on to something else. All right. Bunch of questions from Mr. Fugu, who...
Oh, how fishy was my Fugu?
He prefaces his question saying, to whom it may concern, there will be no pleasant greetings from me. The jig is up. I have figured out the secret of the meditation garden. It is as clear as day. The meditation garden hides a greenhouse full of industrial quantities of Gros Michel. Is that how you say it? Gros Michel?
Gros Michel.
Okay. Bananas. We will not stand for this hoarding of this superior specimen while the masses have to settle for the inferior Cavendish banana. It would also be quite unfortunate if it came to light that a certain unnamed family had something to do with the massive banana crop failures brought about by Panama disease. Of course, rest of the masses don't need to know for the small fee of a monthly 200-pound crate of that superior specimen. Wow. This guy...
That's utterly ridiculous. I've been to the meditation garden, and what's there is...
You're confusing...
What we were saying before?
No. You don't have amnesia when it comes to the meditation garden.
Of course I don't. What's in the meditation garden is...
What, the meditation garden's on the 13th floor now?
No, don't be ridiculous. What's on the 13th floor is...
Your brain is going haywire, Charles. All right, let's move on. More seriously, hello, Vincent. To de-Hispanize and probably de-Catholicize, more successful in the Philippines than in other places like Puerto Rico. Did these efforts intensify or resume post-Vatican II? What did these policies actually look like?
Well, that's a fair question. And the answer is that, number one, the Spanish in the Philippines were not quite so intent on Hispanicizing the natives. In other words, well, on the one hand, for instance, they had the Principalia, who were the native Filipino nobility, and they were sort of integrated into the Spanish nobility, which is what the Spanish did in the Americas with the Indian nobility as well. But there was still the native customs were much stronger in the Philippines, much less Hispanicized than they were in Latin America. And that was actually done partly because of their experiences in Latin America. So you might say that the Hispanic element of the population wasn't so completely overwhelming the way it was in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, the native population was largely replaced by Spaniards, but that didn't happen in the Philippines. The second thing as to what it looked like, well, it was very simple, really. In Puerto Rico and so forth, they retained, I believe, a Hispanic hierarchy in the church. But in the Philippines, what happened was that there was a Filipino Catholic priest named Joseph Aglipay, and he started a schismatic church called the Aglipayan Church, after himself, which went into communion with the Episcopalians. And initially, our first Governor General of the Philippines, a man called William Taft, who was later President of the United States, gave most of the church property to Aglipay. But in return for the Holy See appointing Irish-American bishops to the Philippines and replacing the Spaniards, they got the property back. And from that time on, the church itself became an agent of Americanization in the Philippines. So, whereas in Puerto Rico, the church was very much a bastion of Hispanic culture. So you had that as a major difference, I think.
Wait, so what did you say? The Vatican bartered for Irish bishops, for Irish priests to be put in the
Irish
Philippines?
American, the Spanish hierarchy in the Philippines. Remember, the Americans seized most of the church's property, including most of the churches.
Yeah.
Gave it to this guy called Aglipay for his schismatic church.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we'll give you your property back if you'll fire all the existing Spanish bishops and replace them with Irish Americans.
Taft said that?
No, the American government said that to the Holy See.
But why would they? Okay, gosh, that's so weird.
Why would they do that? To get the churches back from the Aglipayans. Why else?
Okay.
I mean, basically,
why do they
the
have
U.S.
to be Irish American?
Because they were the most. Because remember, this was during the time of the great arguments between the Kehenseites and the Americanists and the American Church, and the Irish Americans were, from the American government's point of view, the most reliable elements. They wanted people who would be firm Americans, not, weirdo krauts and wops and frogs and stuff.
Frogs?
French Canadians, the good guys.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Oh.
Anyway, so in return for the Holy See going along with the gag, the Catholic Church got most of her property back.
Okay. Well.
Well, it's no worse than on Guam. I mean, when we took over Guam in the same year, there was something like 12 priests on the island of Guam. 11 of them were Spaniards, and one was a native Guamanian who was very elderly. So basically, we got rid of the 10 priests and left the one elderly Guamanian, and he had to take care of all of Guam for the next 15 years. And he'd already been feeble, and elderly, but he had to get revitalized. They dragged him in a cart every Sunday all around the island so he could offer mass in 7 or 8 different places.
How big is Guam? Are we talking like 1 million or 100,000 or 10,000?
I don't know. It was pretty big. I mean, for one man, it was a huge assignment.
I see. Okay. What do you think about cultural Marxism? Is it real or not?
I don't know. Ask the little wing-wangs who are burning things and pulling down statues right now. Ask Antifa.
What exactly is cultural Marxism? I've seen some pictures on the internet defining it, but I forget.
Cultural Marxism basically is it's the set of Marxist attitudes toward everything. Completely materialist, anti-tradition as exploitation of something or other. I mean, part of the problem we've got with applying Marxism to current reality is that the proletarian working class of the sort that existed in Marx's day does not, by and large, exist in the West anymore. It does in the Third World. You know, you have all sorts of industrial workers stuck in horrible factories and so on. But you don't get that for the most part, except for some of our slave factories that are mostly, done by foreigners.
Okay.
Except for those, we just don't have a proletariat of the kind that Marx cooked up his schemes to help. So that's why the racial thing is big now, because the class thing is pretty much gone. So basically, what they've done is they've transferred Marxist analysis from class warfare to racial warfare. And what they would do in a situation where you didn't have race either, I don't know. It'd be very hard for the little morons.
Is Scottish Catholicism proper to the patrimony of the Anglican ordinariates? What are some unique aspects of Scottish Catholicism?
Oh, yeah. You bet. There's a lot that's proper to it. The obvious, of course, is the devotion to St. Andrew. You know, the Scots love St. Andrew. Even the Presbyterians love St. Andrew. Well, he's the patron saint of Scotland.
Why?
Because he is.
Okay.
No, the reason is that the great Cathedral of St. Andrews received a lot of his relics in the north of Scotland. And the Archbishop of St. Andrews became the primate of Scotland, the chief cleric. Okay. So you've heard the phrase, the seven defenders of Christendom.
Yes.
St. George for England, St. Andrew for Scotland, St. David for Wales, St. Patrick for Ireland, St. Denis for France, St. James for Spain, and St. Anthony for Italy.
St. Anthony for Italy? Really?
Yeah. Yep.
How does that work?
Ask the Italians, don't ask me.
I thought St. Anthony was Portuguese.
He was. But he went to Padua.
We're going to pick a Portuguese student of St. Francis over St. Francis, who is actually Italian?
Yep. Well, don't let that bother you, though, because most of the patrons of the seven countries were not native.
Well, yeah, obviously, yeah, like St. Patrick, yeah.
St. Patrick, St. Denis, St. Andrew, St. George.
But perhaps you didn't have so many to choose from as you had with Italy. Right? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, like, who's the defender of France? Did they list one? What was the defender?
Yeah, I told you, St. Denis.
St. Denis out of everyone else?
Yep, St. Denis the Areopagite, the first Archbishop of Paris.
When did they decide the defenders?
Gosh, I don't know.
I guess it's before Joan of Arc, too. I mean,
I know I wasn't there then.
I don't know. It's a strange list to me. But okay.
I don't make this stuff up. I just report it.
Okay. What did St. Denis do?
Well, St. Denis was an interesting character. He was, believe it or not, St. Denis was first and foremost the fellow St. Paul ran into in Athens. He was the one who remarked when they had the great earthquake at the time of our Lord's death. Either the fabric of the world is being unmade, or an unknown God has died.
Wow, what gospel is that?
It ain't no gospel. It's a tradition, but it's been held for a very long time. He wrote the people love to talk about the pseudo-Dionysius, but I would recommend anyone who feels that way to the work of Archbishop Darbois of Paris and his work on identifying Saint Denis. Anyway, so he was the first Archbishop of Athens, and then realizing he needed a larger area to express his missionary appeal, he went on to Paris. He was martyred on Montmartre. He was beheaded. Montmartre is the mountain of the martyr. And then he picked up his head, put it under his arm, and walked to Saint Denis.
Oh, he's that
where
saint.
He was interred.
Okay,
What's that?
He's that saint. I knew that
he's
story.
That saint.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty epic.
Yeah, well, people have a hard time with tucking his head under his arm and walking on. But, you know, when you consider what people do today, it's not that far.
Wow. Okay. All right. Very good. So Mr. Fugu's last question: brandy, rum, or whiskey?
Yes, please. I like all three. It depends on the mood I'm in, the company I'm with, what time. I mean, if I were in an Irish or a Scots pub. Oh, you know what? I never finished talking about Scotland. Well, there's a lot more.
Okay.
The Scots, of course, have things like the Burns Night Supper and so forth that are easily incorporated. The bagpipes, naturally. There's actually what is an American custom. You know, it's like with Halloween or with Cinco de Mayo or Juneteenth for that matter. We Americans will take something from other cultures, repackage them, and turn them into something they perhaps wouldn't have done. So back in the 1940s, in a Presbyterian church, the Presbyterians being the major kind of Scots Protestants, the Reverend Peter Marshall invented a ceremony called the Kirkin of the Tartans, which involves people with kilts going into the church and prayers being said and blah, blah, blah. Well, this ceremony has even got into Catholic churches now. It's totally American, but it's been imported to Scotland. And again, like Halloween, these things take on lives of themselves, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to watch. The other thing about Scottish Catholicism, though, is that it was heavily Jacobite. And Mary, Queen of Scots, was a candidate for sainthood. So I guess we could call her a servant of God. Her cause is sort of floating in the air, but that's for a lot of other people. But yeah, there's an awful lot of that kind of thing that's proper to the Scots and so proper to the ordinariate. Anyway, as far as rum, whiskey, or brandy goes, it all depends on what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with. So, for instance, if I were in an Irish or a Scots pub and I was singing Irish or Scots songs with various people, it would have to be whiskey. No way around it.
What if you're just at home?
Again, it would depend on what I was doing. If I had friends I was singing with, it would be whiskey. If I had friends I was reminiscing with, it would be brandy. If it was a hot summer night and very tropical feeling, then it would be rum.
Wow, you've really got this thought out.
Yeah, well, it's not really so much thought out. It's just the way it's worked out over the years.
Right. Bunch of questions from Max.
Oh, boy. Okay.
All right. First question. Elluls, the Technological Society. Any thoughts? I hope I said that right. Elluls?
Ellul.
What is that?
Not what, but who.
Oh.
Ellul is a French a self-described Christian anarchist. I don't really have a lot of. I mean, I've read some of his stuff. I don't really have too much. He's not in favor of hierarchy. Okay.
What's the word? Christian anarchist. That seems like an oxymoron to me. Emphasis on
I don't know.
moron.
Maybe he makes it work. Don't ask me.
It seems hard to take seriously.
Yeah, well, people make money off his books, so obviously there's something there.
All right. Eric Voegolin's views on modern ideologies and Gnosticism. Charles's opinion?
Well, the problem is that Gnosticism is one of those words like democracy, like Christian, like Protestantism. It almost means whatever you want it to mean. Or fascism is another good one. Depending on your bent, it could describe anyone you like or dislike. So I know certain esoteric writers who dub any movement they like in history as Gnostic. I know certain Catholic writers who dub anything they don't like as Gnostic. St. Clement of Alexandria claimed that the only real Gnostics were Christians who were Orthodox Catholics who knew philosophy. So, I mean, it almost turns into whatever you want it to be. A lot of Gnostics were dualists. That is to say, they believed in two gods who were equally powerful. One, the creator of matter, the other creator of spirit, creator of matter bad, creator of spirit good. But they weren't all like that. So, in fact, it's interesting that you'll often hear people say that the seven sacraments, the number of the seven sacraments, was only come up with in the 9th century or the 10th century or whatever. But one of the earliest Gnostic writings we have, the so-called Gospel of Philip, refers very explicitly to the seven sacraments. And this is, back in the 200s or 300s. So, I don't know. I mean, Voegolin is a very good writer. He's got a lot of interesting ideas, but I don't know.
Well, you've outlined perspectives on Gnosticism, but you haven't said anything about Voegolin.
Well, Voegolin was of the belief that the modern ideologies, particularly the ones he didn't like, communism and socialism and so forth, had their roots in Gnosticism. The idea being, see, again, one thing all Gnostics did have in common, but you'll see it didn't mean that much, was the idea that to save your soul you had to have a certain gnosis cardias, a knowledge of the heart, a saving wisdom. Now, where they varied wildly with each other was what the content of this secret saving knowledge was. And what makes it all the more confusing, in a sense, is that until we were legalized, there were elements of our faith that were kept secret, like the real presence. You didn't learn about the real presence until you were baptized. So that's why you've got in different liturgies to this day, you've got the dismissal of the catechumens, and why in the Latin Rite you have the liturgy of the catechumens, the liturgy of the faithful, because at the end of the liturgy of the catechumens were sent out, and the liturgy of the faithful, which deals completely with the bringing of the Blessed Sacrament onto the altar, that was not for the uninitiated. Now, that sounds very much like a description of that secret gnosis. It was called the Disciplina Arcani, the discipline of the secret.
Okay. Incidentally,
that's also why we were sometimes accused of cannibalism, because garbled accounts of our secret beliefs would get out. And they drink blood and eat flesh at their secret rituals. Well, if it's a secret, you don't know. Anyway, so Voegolin believed that basically the Marxist view of life, the communist view of these things, was in itself a sort of secular gnosis. The idea that only the Marxists had the way, only they knew. And I mean, in the end, you'll have some people described as Gnostic anybody who thinks he knows better than other people. So I mean, and when you put it that way, you could claim that any constitutionalist was a Gnostic. Anyone who has a view of the Constitution different from that of the Supreme Court. But then you could turn it on its head and say that the Supreme Court are really the Gnostics because they have a secret knowledge that allows them to interpret the Constitution in ways that are not readily apparent to the outsider.
We republished a sermon from Father Ripperger on 10 Problems in the Traditionalist Movement. And one of the problems is he feels that, he explicitly says that the traditionalist movement is turning Gnostic because we have this secret knowledge that makes us special. How do you feel about that?
Well, again, so much depends upon what you mean by the term. I think that the idea of, the problem you've got is that as with the original Catholics and the Disciplina Arcani, there was a secret knowledge that was necessary to salvation. When we became legal, we were in a position to make it public. But it was from that era of secrecy that all the different Gnostic sects emerged. And there is a sense in which some people really do know better than others what the truth of something is. I hate to break the news, but if that weren't the case, then I would be able to perform brain surgery. But the fact is, some people do know better than others. The trick, however, and I think this is precisely what Father is referring to, is taking a particular pride in it.
Yeah.
The idea that because I know this, I'm somehow better.
Yeah, that's exactly what he says.
Yeah. And but see, that can come with almost anything.
I think.
You've seen the opposite. I would prefer the traditional Mass, and this you would see not so much now, but when I was younger. But I give up my own will to be obedient to the hierarchy. Unlike you rebels. Well, in the sense that Father Ripperger uses that too is a kind of Gnosticism.
Yeah.
And again, it's not so common as it was. But actually, you'll still see it on Twitter. Some of the people that, not Father Martin, but some of the people that, like Fagioli and people like that, you could claim that they were Gnostics since they've got a special in to Pope Francis's mind that apparently everyone else lacks.
All right.
Well, and that's the problem with the term.
Yeah.
I mean, you end up, as I say, being able to call anything you don't like or do like Gnostic, depending on whether or not you like the term.
All right, so you're Gnostic.
Well, it depends on how you say that. If you like Gnostics or not. If you like Gnostics and you call me a Gnostic, I'm good with that. If you don't like them and you call me a Gnostic, I'm not happy.
There you go. Okay.
Or to put this another way, gnosis is in the eyes of the beholder.
Okay, and for those of you who need more Gnostic discussion, tune into our video that's titled, I Am Not a Gnostic.
That's
referring
right.
to Charles's defense that he's not a Gnostic.
Unless I'm lying.
Yeah, wow. I never thought of that. All right.
No, well, people do. It's great when you get to the point to where people say, all right, you wear a bunny suit every day. Your response is, no, I don't wear a bunny suit. Well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Liar. Of course you wear a bunny suit. Have you ever seen me in a bunny suit? No, you hide it so that we won't see you wearing it.
All right.
It's difficult to defend yourself against those kinds of charges.
Well, I think it's evident because how do you, as the Bible says, how do you determine false prophets? You shall know them by their fruits. And clearly, your armies and legions of Gnostics and occultists and all sorts of these people clearly are evidence that you are that.
Well, it's true. My huge power.
Yeah, they're just crawling out of the woodwork. All these people.
Did I tell you George Soros offered me a job?
Yeah, you take it?
Sure. Oh, of course I took it. I've been in the pay of the enemy for years.
All right. Enough of that. Next question. So Max says, Gershom Scholem on the Kabbalah and its symbolism. What are your views on that?
None. I know he wrote about the Kabbalah, but I didn't read what he wrote.
Why do people care about the Kabbalah so much? I don't care about the Kabbalah.
Blessed Raymond Lully did, so there. He wrote about the Kabbalah.
Why?
Because he felt like it. Also because he saw it as a means of converting the Jews. Remember, his big thing was conversion.
Why?
Well, because he felt people needed to save their souls. Huh. Why? Well, he was weird that way.
All right, fine. Max's final question. Abolition of Man, a prophetic book for our time? Referring to
yes.
C.S. Lewis's book. Yes.
Okay. C.S. Lewis's book. You're very prophetic. I mean, man obviously is well on his way to being abolished.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of quotes from that on the internet. Some really sharp quotes.
It's a good book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it highly.
Bonus question number 5.
Okay.
Would Charles rather face off against Belloc or Chesterton in a friendly match of boxing? This is an easy call. I don't know about you, but yeah.
I would go for GK.
Of course.
I mean, Belloc, firstly, he was Anglo-French like myself, Franco-English. So, you know, he's very witty, good right hook.
Yeah.
In other words, I think we'd be too evenly matched. And I don't want a game where I could lose. Whereas GK, he's a big guy. He's kind of slow. Not slow mentally, but physically slow.
He's got a cane.
What's that?
He has a cane, right? Then you have to.
You can't use the cane in boxing. You can't bring weapons to a boxing match.
Okay.
Fine. No, I think I'd win. Now, mind you, it wouldn't speak well for me that I would be doing this.
No, it wouldn't. But yeah.
Well, notice we didn't set up the game. Matt did, so it's his fault, not ours.
Yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Exactly. And hate the game promoter, Matt.
Max.
Yeah. Well, him too. Both of them.
All right.
They're probably in it together. Gonna split the prize money. I know how this I know how this garbage works. I wasn't born in a turnip tent, you know.
Yeah. All right. Next question from Emmanuel. What do you think of the Knights of the Golden Circle? May you talk about their history?
I may.
Where did they hide their gold? Why didn't they use it for the Second Confederacy? Are they waiting for something bad to happen to use it? Maybe.
Well, where do you think Chaz got its? Where do you think Chaz got its money?
Wait, what? What are you saying?
I'm saying Chaz was the Second Confederacy.
Well, what are they talking about? Where did they hide their gold? What are the Knights of the Golden Circle? Let's start from the beginning, shall we?
Oh, I hate it when people want real explanations. It's so much easier just to fob them off with a drivel, but never mind. Well, the Knights of the Golden Circle were a Copperhead organization during the war between the states. That is to say, they were Northerners who were against the war.
Okay.
And rumor has it that they amassed a lot of money, hence the name Golden Circle, for the Confederate war effort. However, if they did, not much of it ever reached them. So the legend is that it was supposedly secreted that the orders survived the war, and they're waiting to fund a second attempt.
Wait, they were Northerners who were really Confederates?
Well, who were pro-Confederates. So you got to bear in mind that a lot of Northerners were against the idea of compelling the southern states to stay in the Union. There were a number of reasons for this. Some of them because they had relatives in the South and so forth. Some of them because they were afraid that if the South were defeated, the northern states would be completely subject to the federal government. In other words, remember they have this idea that the states were sovereign.
Yeah.
Okay. Sovereignty includes the ability to leave the Union. Now,
okay.
A lot of copperheads believed that if the southern states were denied that right, the northern states would then end up being oppressed by the federal government.
And they were right?
Well, it depends on whether you've been paying attention to history after 1865. If not, then maybe not. But at any rate, their great fear was that forcing the southern states back into the Union would in the end destroy the very constitution that the war was allegedly being fought to preserve. And it certainly is an argument. Now, of course, as I've said before, there were other areas of the northern states that tended to be copperhead that had been loyalists during the Revolution. The same way that the equivalent areas in southern states tended to be federalist, pro-union, but had been loyalists during the Revolution. And that seems a little odd at first until you realize that in all three cases, these were areas that were neglected or abused by the people in power in the colonial or state capitals, who in the case of the Revolution were the people who brought you the Revolution, you see. And they turned around to these areas which they had been neglecting or abusing and saying, join us in the great fight for freedom. And their reaction then was, I don't really think I want to do that. You go fight and die for your own thing. We'll support the king. 80 years later, their children and grandchildren in the North, when the same people who were running the show at each state said, come join us in our glorious fight to save the Union. I don't think so. You go send your sons to go fight for the Union, and we'll just be for states' rights. Whereas contrary to the equivalent areas in the South, when told, come join us in our glorious cause for the sovereignty of states. No, you go send your sons to die for the state's sovereignty. We'll stay loyal to the Union, thank you. So you see, it was not so much ideological as it was the question of immediate annoyances. And this you always have in civil wars. You're seeing it today in our own country, in our own time, where people are lining up on things. But, so that was the story of the Knights of the Golden Circle. They were a major copperhead organization. And as I say, the legend has it that they stockpiled a lot of money to help the Confederacy.
And where?
Who knows? Who knows if they actually did it? It was probably, if they ever did, it was probably all spent getting people to Canada.
Okay.
But I'm going to add to the legendary and say that it's not well known, but 6 truckfuls of gold arrived at Chaz just before the mayor sent in her goons. What happened to the gold after that, no one knows.
Well, I hope that isn't fake news.
Who's to know? I wasn't there.
All right. Next question is from Katie.
Hello, Katie.
Hello, Mr. Coulombe. I thoroughly enjoyed a recent interview you did with The Meaning of Catholic concerning the American Revolution. You took many disparate historical points and linked them all together in such a logical and helpful way. It really helped me understand the setup to that first Civil War. Thank you. Near the end of the interview, you dropped a truth bomb. The Archdiocese of Chicago bailed out the Vatican in 1928. Say what? I've never heard of this. Is there some connection between this assistance and the very bad clerics of that diocese being allowed to carry on? Can you tell us a little bit more about the situation? ... And would you please do so?
This is a girl. She's been listening. She pays attention.
That's a perfectly structured question where you start out with wonderful
Lots of
compliments,
praise.
lots of praise, and then you just tie him up at the end so he doesn't mess around. That's a perfectly worded question, Katie. Thank you.
You've obviously been paying attention, Katie, and you've nailed me to the wall. So, fine, I'll give you your answers. So what? I don't care. I don't really know if it has anything to do with what was tolerated in Chicago, but this is what I do know. After 1870, because the Italian government had seized all of the church's property, it was very difficult for the Vatican to make ends meet. They didn't have a lot of money coming in other words. They had Peter's pence, but that was about it. So, by 1928, they were on the point of bankruptcy. Now, this is one reason why the following year they were quick to sign the Treaty of the Lateran with Mussolini, because that regularized their finances, and it put them back on an even keel.
They got a ton of money from that, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
But the year before, they were literally on the point of bankruptcy. But Cardinal Mundelein of Chicago, after whom the seminary was later named, intervened. He had a lot of dough, second largest city in the country, largest archdiocese perhaps. He intervened and he paid off the Vatican's debts.
In exchange for what?
Doubtless he did it out of pure piety.
Yeah?
Out of filial love for the See of Peter.
I don't know. To me, that's strange. Like, out of the entire world, one single diocese is going to pay off? I don't see why he took it upon himself. I mean, it's great, right? I mean, on the surface, face value, that's great. But it seems strange, right?
They were probably the only one that could.
Literally, well...
I mean, maybe New York could have, but I can't think of any other diocese in the world that had that kind of money.
I mean, you can't scrap together? I mean, you can't pass around the hat?
Well, maybe they could have, but they didn't. And he came up with the dough all at once. Easy peasy Japanesey.
I don't know. It seems strange that even in the United States, you can't have some sort of coalition of fundraising on this.
But he didn't. He just paid it off. And the interesting thing was, as I say, the next year the Lateran Treaty was signed. But the precedent was already established because after World War II, due to the disruption in Europe and all that, once again, and for the next at least 10 years, the Holy See was dependent on the American Church for financial survival.
Yeah, and this is why... We talked about this a long time ago. Isn't this sort of why the church doesn't really enforce anything in terms of keeping the bishops in line, is because they can always threaten with Peter's pence?
Well, yeah, but they're always quick to punish Catholics who don't have that kind of power. So it's not like they're totally useless.
That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could always be smacked around if you don't have any money.
All right. Okay. So, what was the reputation of the cardinal that did that? Was it a good reputation? Like what?
Yeah.
Oh, he was. He was. So he was devout, and he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a good reputation.
Okay. Well, that's good.
You know, he again. It would not be. Let's put it this way: if some of the prelates of our time, certainly some of those I've known, did something like that, it would be very hard for me to believe there was no quid pro quo.
Well, see, yeah, I guess that's what I'm operating off of.
Well, we're so used to prelates who are scumbags that, you know, we forget that it doesn't always have to be that way.
Well, also, too, it's kind of, I mean, isn't the bishop sort of a steward of the people in his diocese? So that's like sort of their money.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems like you have less assets to take care of your flock, which is your primary obligation. It's not your
Well,
obligation to bail out the Vatican.
he had so much money.
I guess
The
so. I mean,
Archdiocese of Chicago was so rich that they literally never missed it.
okay. What time period was this? This was
1928.
1920. Capone trying to buy his way to heaven or something?
Let's hope.
Okay.
I believe it or not, I have more trust in the piety of a Capone than of a Kennedy.
Can you? The distinction is lost on me there, Charles.
Well, Al Capone was a violent, nasty guy, but at the end of the day, he was some kind of a believer. Teddy Kennedy was one of the most pro-abort people going, and he was a Eucharistic minister. It's very hard for me to believe in his sincerity on any level. Whereas Capone, I could see, let's put it this way, there's a difference between rubbing out your competition, and especially when you know that they'll rub you out given a chance. That's a bit different from signing off on infanticide and allowing yourself to become a Eucharistic minister into the bargain. There's a level of hypocrisy there that all of Al Capone's gunsels couldn't equal.
Interesting food for thought.
And I don't say this because your great uncle Jerry liked Al.
Of course.
Firstly, all right, let me say this about that. I don't believe any of the rumors. Okay? I never did. I didn't believe them when I was a kid. I don't believe them now. I think that there was a lot of talk and none of it was true. They like to play canasta. All right? Does that make him a criminal?
No.
No, I didn't think so. He liked canasta a lot. So did Al Capone. They played it endlessly. But that's it as far as I'm concerned.
Good. All right.
And I'm really resentful that the whole thing was brought up, frankly.
Yeah, me too. That would make two of us. All right.
On some level, I feel like I'm the guardian of the family's reputation in that area. And in any case, if memory serves, the Franchinis had no business interest in Chicago in those days anyway. It was purely social.
I agree. Very good, Charles.
Can we move on now?
Yeah.
Thank
please, you. Yeah. Okay. So,
we got a book.
For the questions, we have to plug a book.
We got a book to plug. And I've got a question about this book you're going to plug.
Uh-oh.
If they ordered 2 copies, will they get free shipping and handling?
That's right. If they order 2 copies of Star-Spangled Crown by Charles Coulombe, they will get free shipping and handling.
Should they act now?
Yes, they should act now because operators are standing by. Void were prohibited. No CODs. Sorry. Oh, gosh. You're like a little kid, Charles. All right.
Yes, I am like a little kid. It's how I'm still sane.
So you wrote this in the summer of 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. Well, actually, it was just before the election.
Yeah.
It came out in December 2016. But I wrote it in June, July, September, October of 2016.
We published it before the election because I wanted a little aha factor with this first line. Chapter 1, Instauration. The presidential election of 2016 produced a result quite as disastrous as all sides had feared. That's why I wanted to publish it before the election so everyone could enjoy more clearly what you're saying here, which is that it doesn't matter who is elected. Which I don't know if that's true. I'm sure I'm pleased that Hillary is not elected, but...
Well, I am too, but my brother's rather cruel statement after the recent Supreme Court rulings on transgender issues and so forth. was that they said if I didn't vote for Trump, I would get pro-gay, pro-abort justices. So sure enough, I didn't vote for Trump, and I got pro-gay, pro-abort justices.
There is no escape. All right, let me continue. Because this is some of my favorite. This is going to be a real good hook for everybody. This is some of my favorite parts. All right, so continuing on from the first chapter. Then, so the presidential election of 2016 produced a result quite as disastrous as all sides had feared. The next few were, to put it mildly, worse. All the while, national divisions increased, and the general standard of living slowly declined. Successive presidents flailed about, enacting ever more draconian regulations over a whole lot of things, and severely punishing those whom it was still in their power to punish for violating them. Wow. I just reading that again and thinking about what we just went through.
And are going through.
Where's your Palantir or crystal ball, Charles? I mean...
Well, I didn't need one. You see, ineffective leaders, that's their hallmark. Weak, foolish, stupid people in control are weak toward those with power and smack around those they're capable of smacking around. And the more ineffectual and lowlife they are, the nastier they are to those people to whom they can still be nasty.
Yeah.
Those to whom they can't be, they lick the feet.
All right, continuing on. Overseas, the struggles in Europe and the Mideast continued unabated. How long things could have gone on in that fashion is anyone's guess. But then came the so-called Second Great Depression. Who can forget that horrible time when being any kind of minority anywhere, white in black areas, black in white areas, and so on, was an invitation to abuse or death? Lynching of gays and homophobes, dispatched in reaction to one another, depending on what city or state one was in, were commonplace. Of innumerable atrocities that occurred then, two remain in my mind. One was the slaughter of a bunch of college students and their faculty ally in a so-called safe space by terrorists at a northeastern university. The other was the looting and burning of the mayor's residence of a major eastern city. Her Honor had egged on rioters against the police during a similar occurrence some years earlier. Now the same police stood by as the rioters did their work, laughing, whooping, and encouraging the mob in its mayhem. I am sure that all of us who lived through this period have a few similar episodes tucked away in our heads. Every day carried new horror stories, but the crescendo, as we all know, was reached on an early February morning. It had been a bad winter, with large-scale starvation in certain areas. I'll just stand there. I love that line. It's been a bad winter. It was a rough winter. Large-scale starvation. Wow. So, why should people buy this book? What is the takeaway? This is not simply some deranged monarchist fantasy, right? I mean, what are you trying to do here, Charles?
Well, I mean, other than sell books. No, I'll tell you. I had several goals with this book, frankly. One for the American public, and actually one for, you might say, the European public. For the American public, my goal was to have them re-examine the country free from ideological presuppositions. In other words, if you were my age, and a lot of people younger, you were taught that the United States were not merely a country, but an ideal, an ideology, a dream. And this, this dream made us the last best hope of mankind, the shining city on the hill. To be an American was to have aspirations of freedom and self-improvement and all that kind of stuff. The downside was that if that was all American patriotism was, what happens if that ideology isn't true? ceases to be held by the majority of people in any case. What are we left with? So what I was looking to do was to explore the possibilities of an American patriotism based upon the country itself and not upon the ideology manufactured for it in the early 19th century. Not least, of course, because we've done a lot since the early 19th century. If the United States are not the colonies of England, France, and Spain that they were, neither are they the sovereign states of the early republic. There's something very different from either. The question is, what are the United States? And what kind of patriotism can we have that is not dependent on this quasi-religious self-worship? So that was the one thing for the American. For the European, a friend of mine, in fact, Christophe Bouffon-Chazal, who wrote
End of Democracy,
which is another book carried by Tumblr House.
That is actually one of our most popular bundles. If you get End of Democracy and Star-Spangled Crown together, free shipping and handling. But one begets the other, in a sense.
Very true. Very true. The End of Democracy, in a very real sense, was the germ of my book. My book was, in a sense, an answer to it. Because Christophe said to me, this is not in the book, but he said to me, there is not a unified body of Catholic monarchist doctrine in Europe, because monarchists are all intensely nationally oriented. And that's true. But as an American, what I was able to do was to see the commonalities that are not readily apparent to the European. And by applying them to an American backdrop, free, you might say, of European national issues, I was able to look at monarchy, at Catholic monarchy in and of itself, by applying it to a completely alien, well, not entirely, because one of the third point I suppose I might make here is that despite everything, the foundations of the United States are very monarchical, because we were created by three different monarchies. And if you know what you're looking at, it screams at you. So, in so doing, in creating an American monarchy based upon the ideals of European Catholic monarchy and using what was already here in germ, I figured this would allow the reader also to explore monarchy in the abstract, Catholic monarchy in the abstract. I mean, if you're going to read the book to try to get some sort of an apologia for the Ottoman Sultan or the Manchu Emperor, better keep looking. But you will definitely, I think, see an illustration of the dynamics of Catholic monarchy in general. Because what happens basically is that with the fall of our republic and the admittedly deus ex machina coming of the king, basically I need a king, so I create one.
Right.
Although, to be fair, and this was picked up by people really early on, he is a fictionalized version of a person who may already be living.
Yeah.
So what should happen, but that my fictional president is basically charged with creating from what's around here.
Wait, your fictional king?
Yeah, my fictional king.
Oh, I thought you said fictional president. Okay.
No. The fictional king has basically to create from the material that's already here and the reduced quintessence of European Catholic monarchy. He has to try to create a regime against the American backdrop that will, on the one hand, be a real and true Catholic monarchy, but on the other hand, also American. And it's very difficult. I mean, there was a lot of circle squaring that he ended up having to do. One of the obvious things, of course, is that he himself was Catholic. The nature of his monarchy would be Catholic, but he would be presiding over a people, the majority of whom are not Catholic. So how do you handle that? Well, it's been handled in the past. And so I took a lot of inspiration from past events. And you'll see a lot of that, because not just in terms of doctrine, but also monarchical history. I took certain omnipresent motifs, shall we say, and used them in setting this thing up. One of the things, of course, and this is generic in new governments of any kind, was his appropriating as much as he could of the old regime to his own purposes. That's why today, for instance, in the entire Third World, most of the seats of government were the old colonial seats of government, where once the colonial governor sat, now the president of the country sits. So I just reversed it. Instead of building a new palace, the king lives in the White House, and Camp David is sort of his Versailles. Instead of getting rid of the flag, and I thought long and hard about that, but then I decided, the problem is that the flag is so much a part of the American identity. And if he came up with one of his own, there would immediately be loyalists who'd hold on to the old flag. So instead, he keeps it and incorporates it into the new royal symbolism. So much so that you can't burn the flag in this future America, because to do so is considered the crime of lèse-majesté. And if you burn the flag, you might as well throw a rock at the king and see what happens to you.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean, these are the things when you're trying to put together a new government. I mean, the generation immediately after the Founding Fathers did something very similar in the United States. They were the ones who created the religion of the country, people like Noah Webster. And they did so very consciously. In Japan, it was the same with the Meiji Restoration. And the funny thing about these sorts of things in history when they're done, they're not entirely true, but they're not entirely false. You can't make up an ethos out of nothing. But you can definitely add a lot that really might not have been there originally, which is certainly what the Founding Fathers did, or more importantly, the people immediately after them. I have no doubt that if you had told George Washington that he never told a lie, after he stopped laughing, he would have wondered how much you've been drinking. But generations of American school children were raised to believe that George Washington never told a lie. Do you know what one of the most popular dishes on Washington's birthday was when I was a boy? Cherry pie.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Even you've heard the cherry tree story.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it funny? Now, nobody believes it. Everyone knows it never happened, but we still all know it.
Well, it's like folklore, right?
It's like folklore, except
you weren't there, Charles.
Usually folklore is passed on because people have a halfway believing to it.
You weren't there, okay? If you're going to give El Cantuna the benefit of the doubt, you need to give George Washington the benefit of the doubt, too.
And I was there. I was his babysitter. I gave him the axe. And I said, "What have you done? Your father's going to be so mad with you, Master George." And he said, "I cannot tell a lie, Mr. Coulombe. I chopped it down with my little hatchet." And I said, "Fine, go tell your father." And he said exactly the same thing to his dad. And then we all had cherry pie.
That's a wonderful story.
You sound very disbelieving. See, the youth of America have lost their belief in these kinds of heroics.
Okay.
So, all kidding aside, though, I want to emphasize that because I have had a number of people point to different elements in the book and say, "Oh, wow, you've got a crystal ball or something." No, it's just knowing history and knowing human nature and knowing how people tend to react to different stimuli. Frankly, I did not expect what we're going through this year. I mean, I've always expected at some point, sometime in the vague future, something like this. I had hoped I wouldn't be around to see it. But guess what? That's why, I appear as a character in the book, but I'm very old. I'm about 30 years older than I am now.
Yeah, you need saving.
Yeah, well, I'm like 90.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to happen when I was 60. But I suppose it's like the fellow who wrote Idiocracy. He said, I set the film 500 years in the future, not 15.
Yep. All right. We've run out of time, but that's because we've given you over 2-hour episode. So
we gave you a real long one, but you know what? I want to, if you won't mind indulging me, because I want to send up our audience, particularly on a day when I myself am very upset and would like to run around breaking people and things. I would like to read a poem by Rudyard Kipling.
Okay.
That my father introduced me to when I was quite young. Kipling was not a Catholic. Yes, I know. He was an English Freemason. All right, fine. And he was born in India. Yes, I know. Anything else you want to share? Okay, fine, thanks. But having said all of that, my dad thought this was a great guide for young people, and so do I, especially right now. Because the temptation at the moment is to lose our tempers and go cray-cray. And that's what the devil wants. We mustn't do it. And this, although it's very, in a sense, secular-minded, nevertheless, it's good advice. It's a poem called If by Rudyard Kipling. And here it is. If you could keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you could trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you could dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you could meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you could bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, if you could make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you could talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. And that, dear friends, I offer to you in this time of madness and insanity, when everything seems to be telling us to run around like chickens with our heads cut off. And sometimes it's quite willing to cut off our heads just to see us do that. Don't be that guy. Say your rosary, go to adoration, go to mass, take no guff, accept no substitutes. These are dark times. They may get darker, they may not. This may be the worst we go through. The end may be in sight, or it may get a lot worse before it gets better. People of my age may not see it get better. Who knows? I don't. But, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes on the prize. God himself in heaven. That's what we're here for. We have not here an abiding city. And sooner or later, we're all going to die. In the immortal words of Jim Morrison, none of us gets out of here alive. In the immortal words of the Rocky Horror Picture Show stays sane inside insanity. And, in the immortal words of L. Sprague de Free, what?
Yeah, what?
He was quoted on many occasions.
Oh, okay.
That's what he said. What? I didn't say he was a profound thinker. Did you ever once hear me call him a profound thinker? I don't think so.
Okay.
But I do believe that his gut reaction to what was going on at his time, what? Is something that will find an echo in many hearts today.
Surely. Okay.
Well.
So that will do it. Remember, if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may very, very possibly just be your own. God bless all. We'll see you next week.